Okay, shall we start? So, good evening. Thank you all very much for coming here tonight, and thanks to the LSE Student Society, Spanish Student Society, for inviting me here tonight. As you can tell from the slide above here, we're here to discuss Spain, what's gone wrong with it, and whether things are, as some commentators think, whether things are actually going better now for the Spanish economy. I'm Ferdinando Giugliano. I'm a leader writer for the Financial Times. I write editorials on the global economy, and I've been tracking Spain quite closely, especially last year and the year before, when Spain was keeping us very, very busy, being firmly at the center of the sovereign debt crisis in the Eurozone. Just to give a short recap for those of you who might not know, Spain was hit severely by the sovereign debt crisis, was asked to apply for a bailout or a rescue, international rescue from its Eurozone partners to rescue its banking system, which there was a major crisis which was undermining actually the confidence in the sovereign. The sovereign was having difficulties in borrowing at acceptable rates, and this forced Spain to apply for international help. On the side, the government led by Mariano Rajoy, which is still in power, implemented a raft of structural reforms, but also painful spending cuts, which initially had a very severe effect on the economy, major recession, unemployment hitting 26.5%, with youth unemployment climbing even higher. However, since the autumn, the situation has improved quite substantially. Output is still well below where it was before the crisis, but at the same time now the economy is expanding, with posting 0.2% growth at the end of last year, and it seems to be expanding again in the first quarter of this year. A number of investors are now looking at Spain as a possible investment destination. You see a number of car makers, for example, Ford, Volkswagen, Renault, to just quote a few ones, hiring again or moving their plants to Spain. And some high-profile investors, such as, for example, George Soros, the U.S. hedge fund manager, one of the most prominent ones in the financial world, has placed a bet on the Spanish property market, which some might see as a big paradox, because that's exactly where the crisis essentially started. However, the signs of the scars of the recession are still deep and there. Unemployment is still very high. Thousands of Spaniards still leave Spain, many of them coming actually to London in search of a job and a better future. There are still thousands of long-term unemployed. That's a major problem at the moment confronting Spain. How you bring down long-term unemployment, people who had been working in the construction sector and cannot find a job now that the property bubble has ended, and the government is still trying to close the deficit. The debt has climbed and is continuing to climb. It is now around 100% of national income. So there are big challenges which remain, but as I said, the outlook looks to be improving. And so tonight we'll be here discussing whether we think Spain is on the road to a recovery, whether this recovery is likely to be sustainable, and I'm also interested in knowing whether our guests think that Europe can help, the Eurozone in particular, can help Spain on the way out of the crisis. We're very lucky because we've got a fantastic panel with 4 very distinguished speakers, actually coming from very different trades. We've got on my left Luis Garicano, who's a professor here at the London School of Economics, and who's published widely in a number of economics journals, and has written, is one of the co-editors and the founders of a wonderful blog, which I strongly recommend to go and take a look at. I always do. It's called Nada es Gratis, which is a blog which looks at economic policy and comments on various economic matters, which involve Spain mainly, but not just. And he's also written a book, which is here with me, El Dilema de España. You will excuse my Spanish, which is fine, okay. We'll start speaking. Then next to him there is Daniel Lacalle, who's an economist and a senior portfolio manager. So he's both written. He's written a number of books as well, but can also offer a perspective which is, in a sense, intermediate between the one of a writer and a commentator and the one of a market operator. And then we've got Emilio Saracho, who is really the market man here at our desk, who's the deputy CEO of JP Morgan for Europe, and he's got an extensive experience in banking for 30 years, over 30 years, and for sure he will offer us a more private sector perspective on the crisis. And finally, Pablo Zalba, who's sitting who's an MEP for Spain for the European People's Party, and is Vice President of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, so certainly a big institutional player in this crisis, who will offer his view and how he sees Brussels reacting to the crisis now. So I will start with Luis Garicano. I will ask our speakers to obey to what some would define as strict conditionality. You're allowed to speak, but for 10-12 minutes max, so that we can possibly finish by 7:45 and leave some time for the many questions which I'm sure will follow this engaging debate. So, Luis, can I start by asking you maybe to give us, you've written a lot about how the crisis started. You've looked into financial institutions, what went wrong there. Just a roundup of what do you think went wrong with Spain? And also I'm interested to know whether you think the problems you've identified in the Spanish economy and the politics have been solved now that the outlook is improving.
Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for the Spanish Society members for organizing this. I know it's a lot of work, and certainly kind of putting us all in the same room. I can tell you that takes a lot of emails. In my case, a lot of emails. And thanks very much to Ferdinando for the help, and to all of you for also being here. It's a very illustrious panel. I know all of them, and so it kind of makes it a lot of fun. I have thought a lot indeed about why we got here. I mean, I guess everybody wants to know more how we get out of here. Very shortly, I think that the Spanish economy has had very serious trouble and has actually been in more trouble than many people may be willing to acknowledge for longer than just this crisis. It seems strange to say since we were booming before, but many economists were writing about, and I was writing about among them, about the problems with the low total factor productivity growth. In fact, it was negative. Productivity was negative for all those years of growth since the euro entry a little bit earlier than that. There was a growth that was very unbalanced, very kind of sugar rush type of growth that basically was entirely extensive. It's basically adding more people, more bodies to the labor market. When you count immigration plus increasing female participation, you basically get the entire growth. There is no productivity to add to that. And I think what I fear, and maybe it's a big part of the argument in the book that I just published, is that the crisis left Spain in a tricky situation in terms of long-term growth. Everybody understands that when you have a debt overhang, growth is problematic. But I think there are two issues that really worry me, and one of them today is even worrying me more than yesterday. The two issues are institutions and human capital. So basically, when economists look at growth, the research, economists, people think that they have many opinions, and maybe when it's about macro, there is disagreement. But my sense is that you will not find an economist who will disagree with the statement that long-term growth is about having good institutions that protect property, that protect participation, that protect freedom, what we call in Spanish, for many Spaniards in the audience, seguridad jurídica, and human capital. You have a population that is educated and that can innovate and can fit in the new global economy. I think the bubble and the bad type of growth we had post-euro entry damaged both of those things. I think that the euro allowed Spain to kind of pretend that it didn't need to be reformed anymore. It was like, okay, well, we're growing, so who needs to reform? And not only that, but in fact meant there was a U-turn on some issues. So, for example, dropout rates in Spain, which were dropping like everywhere in Europe, if you look at Italy or Greece or any other country, modernization means people finish high school. And high school dropout rates in Spain actually started increasing exactly with the euro entry. As we entered into the euro, there were plentiful jobs in construction that paid very well, and there were plentiful jobs in the real estate and in the tourism business, and that meant that a lot of people left their jobs to their less studies to work. That meant that when the bubble's been finished, we are facing a very serious unemployment problem that has a big component that is structural. 65% of unemployed people in Spain right now are more than a year in unemployment. No, 65 or 60 right now. I made myself a note. 60% are more than 1 year unemployed. Basically 3.5 million of the basically 3.8 million jobs lost are either primary educated, or so half of the people who had primary education lost their jobs with the crisis, and we haven't seen that growing back. Secondary or less than secondary or secondary education. So first point, human capital issues. A lot of the unemployment has to do with people who basically are prepared to work in construction but not much else, or in other related business. The second fear of the crisis is, of the bubble, is I think that the institutional framework that supports an economy has been damaged. One thing that is very important to notice, and I don't know if people realize as much, is that Spain has no corruption whatsoever in terms of the daily transactions. And I really mean it, okay? You're probably surprised, you probably think, oh, Spain's very corrupt. I've never in my entire life heard one anecdote of anybody who's ever said, I gave 50 euros to a policeman to stop a fine, or I gave 50 euros to a doctor to jump the queue and be attended earlier. It's never happened. I haven't heard it, and I haven't heard any Spaniard telling about that. There is absolutely no corruption in everyday life. And yet, the political system, as far as we can tell, is riddled. I actually didn't know it. If you had asked me 6 years ago, I would have said, nah, there's no way ministers in the government or prime ministers or people at the highest level have been involved in corrupt activities. I would have put my, like we said in Spanish, my hand on the fire for that, okay? I think the result of all these scandals and all this sense that there is really a serious problem at a high level is that there is gigantic lack of confidence in the political system. I think we are heading towards a very fragmented set of results in all of the forthcoming elections, which basically are shown by the fact that if you look at just declared votes and you don't do any of the estimates that polling houses are making, which don't make any sense to me, they don't have any evidence to make those adjustments, the sum of the two main parties in terms of declared votes has collapsed by more than half. The sum of PSOE plus Popular Party is now at 40% in terms of declared votes. And you adjust up and you say people are hiding the vote or they'll change their mind, whatever. But there is no empirical precedent to do that kind of adjustment that people are doing right now. So if you actually look at that, what you see is a system that is under a lot of pressure in terms of lack of trust from the people, where judiciary, where a lot of crucial institutions are really discredited. And so my fears, if you ask me, like, where are we going now, my fears for Spain are, do we have the basic core building blocks of long-term growth? What makes Denmark, what makes Holland, what makes Canada, what makes all of these countries grow over 30 years? Not, are we going to get out of the business cycle? Yes, Spain is growing a little bit now. Yes, we are, registered unemployment has gone down by 220,000. Social Security registered people have gone up by 150,000. Housing prices have dropped by 40%. All those things show Spain is not dropping anymore, and it's probably growing moderately. Okay, that's not enough for a country with the debt that we have. There are very nasty debt dynamics that hopefully Daniel will illustrate a little bit, particularly for a country that is entering deflation right now. There's no inflation at all. So the combination of, so we're growing, but we're not going to grow. I think we're not going to grow enough. And we have to really stop the sugar rush. We have to do the kinds of things that are deep, kind of structural, and this involves human capital. It takes years, but we continue having educational reforms which are kind of about whether we speak Catalan or not, or whether we teach religion or not, and those are like, come on, I mean, whatever, you know. Let's just agree that we need to teach the kids math and physics and computers and all the things that they need to learn, and creativity and all those things. So I just fear that there is kind of too much satisfaction. The market is coming back, so people in Spain are thinking, well, we don't need to do anymore. And my sense is that that is not the right analysis of the situation. My sense is that, in a way, okay, the hard arrest is stopped, and we are delighted. Draghi has helped a lot to that. But the cancer is still there, and we have to treat it. Okay, we cannot just say, well, we're not going to die tomorrow, so that's fine. My last point, I'm just getting to the last minute of my 10, is, I actually wanted to make a small point on institutions. So institutions, as you know, 3 directors of the 3 biggest selling newspapers in Spain, the 2 Madrid and 1 Catalan ones, were changed in the last month. Last couple of months, pressure apparently from the government was not unrelated to this. We do seem to have, I mean, I do have a sense that you know, there is increasing involvement by the political power in every sector of the economy. I mean, it's happening everywhere. I know it's happening in the UK, it's happening in the US. But if you count in Spain, electricity, finance, and all the banks, and you add all the infrastructure, which all of these companies come off either bankrupt or in trouble or whatever, you start adding numbers. Well, not all of them, sorry, but a lot of these companies are in trouble, so that means they depend a lot on the state helping. You really have 70, 80, maybe more % of the economy that is controlled, and that means that freedom is an issue for me, or freedom of expression. My last point that I was going to make was accidents can still happen. I think the market has this weird behavior, which is, if you talk about something that is on the horizon beyond the day after tomorrow, they say that's beyond my trading horizon. Maybe Daniel will disagree, and maybe Emilio will disagree. But they do say this is outside of my trading horizon the moment you push them beyond a few months. Spain has one big accident that I worry about, that we have to deal with, and that's the whole, specifically the whole Catalan question, which is basically hanging over us. There is a lot of risks that I think everybody knows. Chicken games, you know, one of the drivers has to kind of swerve in the last minute, and if both drivers hope that the other one swerves, or if they don't have the guts to kind of lose face, then you crash, okay? This makes no sense, okay? You shouldn't have people purposely provoking accidents, but I do worry that the situation there looks kind of like I mean, for a country that is not cured and that has these debt dynamics, as I was saying, I mean, I do worry that the risk of accidents is still kind of there. So, yes, we're growing. Yes, Spain is kind of, stopped plummeting, but we need to kind of make the investments in long-term growth. There are institutions and human capital. We need to deal with the risk of accidents, and I don't see right now a political system that is willing or able to do that. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Luis. That was quite a gloomy start, but plenty of food for thought for later. Now, I want to ask Daniel whether he shares this assessment, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say that actually, I mean, Luis has basically portrayed an unreformed economy in many respects. But some would say that over the last couple of years, things have moved on a number of fronts. For example, the labor market has been reformed. Some parts of the product market have been reformed, maybe not as much as one would have hoped, but there's been change there. Now there is a new tax reform coming up. So, I mean, do you think these reforms have had some effects, at least in boosting short-term confidence in the Spanish economy?
I do agree that labor, I mean, the day the labor reform came out, I said, it's not my reform, but it's a good reform. I mean, it's not the one I would...
No, I'm just...
Just to not...
Yeah.
I love this picture. I absolutely love the picture that we have been... The problem and the solution. And, you know, as you probably know, the four towers here in Madrid, they're virtually empty, as you probably know, are as what David Lee Roth used to say, I am the party, no? This is the party, and this is the solution. And the solution, as always, is the people, is the buildings below that full of people, hard-working people doing what they do best, which is to save and to try to get along despite the government. And there's plenty of challenges in Spain, When I left Spain in 2004, I said that I saw lots of problems coming up, and I was called almost anti-patriotic at some point. And you sometimes tend to give up, but we forget that Spain always recovers, and recovers quicker because, and despite the political system and the judiciary system, mainly because we don't sue each other, which is a very good thing that tends to also to solve problems in Spain despite, compared to the UK or the US. So there's been lots of things that have happened, and that have been part of the recognition of the problem. And the biggest issue that Spain had wasn't an issue of numbers. And when people rightfully claimed that markets were unfairly looking at Spain, sometimes they said they used numbers in comparison with other economies, and they said, look, we're not that bad. The problem was the acceleration of how badly it was getting. Now, we went from a 3% surplus to an 11% deficit in a year. You don't do that in Vegas. You go to the Caesar's Palace, and it's difficult to get that kind of loss. So the party was the problem, and the solution is that we can't do it anymore, even if we wanted to. And believe me, we're desperate. We would love to. We would love to go back into a big real estate bubble, go back to the party, bring back the BMWs for 20-year-olds without education, and go back to Marbella and have a time of your life. It's not going to happen. So we burst the bubble. We burst the real estate bubble, and we burst the civil works bubble, which was huge. You know, I went to give a conference in Pamplona this Monday, and the plane that I was catching from Bilbao got cancelled, and I had a choice of not one, not two, not three, but 4 airports in 150 kilometers around there to fly back to London. Which tells you how crazy we've been in terms of civil works as well. So the real estate bubble got burst. The civil works bubble got burst and left a very important overcapacity, but also left assets that are there and that can be utilized. This is an important factor. I could fly back, and I'm here thanks to the fact that I had 4, actually 5, you're absolutely right, airports to choose from to come back to London. There's one bubble that has not been burst, and that's the public spending bubble. And the public spending bubble is a huge problem in Spain. It's a huge problem in Spain because everyone, like David Lee Roth, likes to party. And people have grown accustomed to a political system. The reason why all this corruption is coming up is what my grandmother used to say, the snails only come out when the rain stops. And the rain stopped, and the rain of receiving a little bit of benefit from all that corruption stopped getting to the lower ends of the pyramid, and then the lower ends of the pyramid started to get angry. And one of the directors, a good friend of mine, one of those newspapers that has been fired, Pedro J. Ramirez, said to me, you know, I just can't cope with the number of people that are coming to me with complaints about corruption. So that third bubble needs to burst, and it's a very important factor, because by bursting it, you start to solve a lot of the other problems. The lack of faith in the political system, the level of intervention of government into strategic sectors of the economy. Spain is the only country in the world that has seen its electricity prices go up by 80% in the middle of the crisis. So all those things are there. But we have 143,000 companies exporting. With a very expensive euro, we are exporting at maximum levels, at historic highs. And more importantly, it's not just that we're exporting more because Asia is growing, etc., which is, by the way, as you know, decelerating. We are gaining market share in exports. This is a very important factor. A second very important factor is that while recognizing the problem is a typical issue of the Spaniards, we first blame the others. It's the Germans, it's the markets, it's the hedge funds, and then we say, okay,
the Financial Times.
It is the Financial Times. For even Jeremy Clarkson was to blame at some point, and finally we say, oh, okay, fair enough, it was us. Yeah? But this is a critical part of what has happened in the private sector. Private debt is back to levels of 2006. Company debt in Spain, private debt, has come down to 2006 levels. Family indebtedness has also come down to levels close to 2007. So Spain is saving despite the increase in public debt, and public debt has also increased significantly despite the so-called austerity, which I'm yet to see. I don't know I don't know where is austerity when you spend 492 billion, and you have and you were spending 412 in the middle of the party. No? But a lot of it is part of the recognition of the problem. 30 billion of unpaid bills, a lot of things that have come out of under the carpet. We had a lot of under the carpet, closing some of the thousands of public enterprises, deficit-creating public enterprises that we had, and therefore recognizing up to 45 billion of debt that was sort of hidden here and there. So there's a lot of an effort in transparency that is the reason why international investors are looking at Spain in a different way. Because in the past, it was simply like, look, tell me what you want. I'm not believing you. Now it's not a question of believing. It's a question is at least you're giving me the numbers. It's my decision how to analyze them, but at least the numbers are not fake as they were before. At least the numbers of non-performing loans are not, as I remember in the peak of the crisis, they were telling me, no, non-performing loans in Spain are 2%. We have the best financial system in the world. It's fake. It's fake. It's fake. It's a Kim Kardashian picture. So the key right now is we have gone from an environment in which we had lots of opportunities and lots of issues. And those issues outweighed the opportunities. The opportunities are starting to transpire in a much stronger way than we expected. And let me tell you one thing. I know only one country in which we have had to revise GDP growth expectations by doubling estimates in 3 months, from 0.6 to 1.2. That's Spain. In all other countries, except the UK, in which we've done a bit of an adjustment upwards, everything else we've brought it down. Every other country we've brought it down, our estimates. So that's an important double. I mean, double estimates is something that one has, and it comes from consumption, and it comes from investment. So things are improving. Now, what is very important is that every time that a situation like this has happened in the past, we've said, party again. We've said, this is it, man, this is it, okay? Hollywood Bowl, 9 a.m., let's go. And the problem that we have, at least the reason why I'm more hopeful this time is that what we don't have is fuel to the party. The guy that brings the pills has gone. And you know, the European Central Bank has lowered its, think about this, the European Central Bank has brought down its balance sheet by 24%, and the European Union is going to grow more than Japan this year by Japan increasing 40% the balance sheet of its central bank. So there is something happening in Europe that us Europeans don't like to recognize, because we go from a euphoria shock to a depression shock, and we are in depression shock right now. Now we hate everyone. We hate the Germans. We hate the French. Now we even hate the Greeks, which are growing more than us. So that is a big part of the improvement process. The other part of the improvement process is that once the population sees that, and let's not call it austerity, let's call it budgetary control, semi-control. Once budget control starts to be proving to provide both growth and net job creation, and I expect 800,000 jobs created in Spain in the next 4 years, then people will not demand from their governments or from their likely candidates in the elections more statues and more bridges and more airports. And that's a very, very important lesson that I think we have all learned. From the market perspective, what I think is the market is actually seeing beyond. And I think that what the market is actually thinking is, it's not about Spain solving its problems, it's about Spain recognizing its problems. And recognizing is a very, very, very important factor. And that's why the market is running away from countries that don't recognize their problems to countries that at least, where you can be at least safe to know that, yes, maybe real estate will not go up in the next 10 years. But I know one thing, is that I am not going to be eaten by inflation in an investment based on growth. At least I'm getting it on value.
And what about debt dynamics?
Debt dynamics, to me, one very important, very...
Just a quick answer, though, because...
I'll finish there. In terms of debt dynamics, we have two problems in Spain. We have a problem of stock, and we have a problem of volume. The problem of stock is a problem of the entire European Union, is a problem of the entire OECD. You look at total debt in the countries that we think are the leaders of the world. Japan, it's about 520%. US is about 350%. There's a huge problem of debt everywhere. There's one thing in this that I think is very important. Reducing the deficit, even if it's very high, because there's a lot of one-offs that we had to recognize from the past, is a very important factor to lose steps in the race to see who loses first, which is the race in debt dynamics. The race in debt dynamics is not to get less indebted, it's see who defaults first. And we are not in the forefront, close to the edge, down by the river, that we were. So we've taken a few steps back, and those few steps back, if we go back to having a level of deficits that comes back to the 3.5–4% level, will be significantly better when we see the next debt shock that is going to come from emerging markets.
Daniel, I'm going to stop you there. Thank you very much. And I'm going to move to Emilio. And I would like to hear more perhaps about this, given your position at the center of the financial markets, a bit more about this interest from investors. Is this opportunistic, or is there something long-term going on, you think, among the investors community?
Yeah, well, before I do that, I want to do something, because otherwise I will feel bad. So I want Victor, I want you to stand up. Okay. Victor is the guy that has certainly dragged me here. Victor is a student is also the president, I think is the title, right? The president of the Spanish Society in the London School of Economics. And Victor is an example of the type of things I see all the time, of people that actually have a day job and not happy with that, then they put themselves on another job, which is to bring us all here, hopefully to do something useful. So thank you for that. The second thing is I want to make a comment on and I will not forget your question, Ferdinand, so don't worry, I'm not going to evade it. But, the Spain finally on the road to recovery. And I was in the Inditex port, which I'm very fortunate to be in. It's a world-class company that doesn't seem to have a crisis. They obviously sell less in Spain and Greece than they did, but they're selling more in China and in other places, and it looks like it's levitating in a God-forgotten place close to La Coruña. So miracles can happen. And I go to the hotel, and there's this very few newspapers. And there was a Wall Street. Don't know why they had a Wall Street in this hotel in La Coruña, but they did. And I read an article on Ukraine, which is obviously very good. And the article had a lot of things that are not relevant. They had one Ukrainian joke. The Ukrainian joke, I think, is relevant. And this is an Ukrainian dog that actually leaves Ukraine and crosses the border to Russia. And in doing so, talks to the guy who's there in the border and says, I'm going to Russia, because in Ukraine, there is no food. Okay, so the guy goes. And 3 days later, the dog comes back and crosses back into Ukraine. And then he says, well, are you back? Yeah, I'm back, because in Russia, there is no food. But also, dogs are not allowed to bark. So, basically means, what I'm trying to say here is that everything is relative, okay? And there has to be context to almost everything in life and to every discussion. So when we say Spain is back to recovery, is on the road to recovery, I'm going to argue not in the same road. I mean, whatever road we're taking is not the same road we were in. So if people think that we are linear, just you take a road and it goes up and it goes down. No, in real life, you kind of move to a new reference. It takes some time for people to adjust to a new reference, and I think we are in a new reference in Spain. Everyone is in a new reference after this crisis. It has new parameters. And the book that Luis, by the way, I'm going to make a little bit of a pitch, for your book. The book that he's written, the pity is that he didn't write it in 1996, okay, or 2006, before the crisis, because, who would have had any interest in writing a book with all these very hard-headed facts about our country? So when things are going well, there's no way to stop the party. The party is not artificial. The party is universal. And by the way, the party was global. Mm-hmm. It wasn't. Spain is a very open economy, very well connected, cannot isolate itself from the good or the bad of the rest, and of course was enjoying the benefits of easy credit and, our growth that maybe we thought that we were smarter than we were. Maybe we thought that we had a better political system. Maybe we thought that, if we had corruption, it was just like rounding error. Mm-hmm. And now, suddenly, the water comes down, and then we're all fustigating ourselves of how bad we are, and, we can write not a 150-page book, but, maybe more, mm-hmm. to fustigate ourselves about, all the problems that Spain have. But, we're not alone, right? And there are other countries that, have not made any reforms, just to even make it more complicated, and the risk premium has gone down. So, when I hear the politicians very happy about themselves because they made some reforms, I'm not going to make any comment if they're good or whatever reforms they thought that they needed to do, and therefore they attribute to themselves the responsibility for the improvements that are very clearly being seen. I can point to other places where there has been no reforms and the risk premium has gone down. So, I think we really need to move a little bit more in time and space to understand the problems that we live today, because otherwise the cacophony It's really, I mean, it hurts you in the head. So, if we go to investors are there to make money with money. Okay? Usually, it's not their money, by the way, which is also a big problem, that people think that the people that are investing is kind of, they kind of have their money. It's usually money given by other people, usually pension plans, insurance companies, and maybe people in this room are giving those investors that are doing these things that sometimes are horrible or other times are not so horrible, depending on if it fits us or not. That's not, that's the people money that are decided to give to those investors to manage, like you and others. So, when Spain was suddenly exposed in all its weaknesses, and there were many economically, investors sold everything they could and went massively short Spain. When things got better and they were short, they are coming back. And they're coming back, some of them in one way and some other in the newspaper, like Mr. Soros, and others are coming back every day in different ways. And of course, people in the UK are buying now houses in Soto Grande and in other places. Some of them are doing it, more. So it's nothing new. And it's just the flow and ebb of what investors have to do. They move in, they move out, and some of the investments are less liquid than others. So, if they are caught in that, they will have difficulty to get out. So clearly things are better, but I don't think that it can be really attributed to, in such a direct way to government policies. It certainly, in my view, can be attributed to Mr. Draghi's famous 6 words, because what Spain had was a crisis within a crisis within a crisis. So we had kind of several levels of crisis, where some of them are about the structure of the economy that was very biased towards one engine, which was construction and construction-related, that had boomed and made, fortunes, and, it just was obvious to everyone, economists and non-economists, that there was no way that we could, build a country on the basis of building 700,000 new houses per year, which was more than it was built in the whole of the European Union in a year. It was, and still you could hear very, very smart people making arguments that Spain somehow, with single dwellings and being the Florida of Europe, were going to be able to place that stock. It was just impossible. But as long as the money was flowing in and you had infinite credit, and if you guys here sitting ever be in that position, God forbid, that you are given credit for anything you wanted, you will also go bust. It will not be anything specific. It requires so much restraint and self-control that is very difficult to stop. And we were a little bit in that position. We came into the euro. We did a lot of things out of that, but one of it was to have basically access to a credit market that we didn't have before. They took away some things that we didn't think were very important. They become very important. The capacity to move our currency, the capacity to really move around and take our own destiny. Now we have to negotiate with other people, so we are going to be restricted. I think Spain is going, the more that it was in the crisis and the longer it's in the crisis, the stronger it becomes. Now, I don't want to become like whoever it is. Something that doesn't kill me makes me strong, but I certainly believe that this crisis will change this country forever. But will it resolve all the problems that Luis rightly points out? Fundamental problems like, education, the quality of our software, our institutions? Of course not. That is a much harder work that people like him and others need to go on if you are in public policy and you are in, and so in that type of responsibility. And it will be hard because politicians also respond to what they think makes them electable. And to go and tell people in Spain or in any other country the truth as it is will not get you elected. So now that's not a very good deal if your business is politics. Saying the truth hard as it is very difficult. So when we say, oh, you promise something, well, that's an aspirational program. But let's believe it, they'll do whatever they have to do once they're in. And this happens everywhere. And once after the other time, we fall into the same thing that I have to read that Mr. So-and-so, it doesn't matter if it's Rajoy now or it was whoever it was before, promised A and did B. Well, sorry, but I do that all the time. I promise a budget in the bank, and then I deliver something else. because simply what I promised was aspirational and what I find is real life. So I think that we need to kind of take all these things one at a time, but I certainly think that Spain is in the road of recovery, not the same road, certainly, a different road, and that although we will not solve all the problems, and certainly we will not solve all the problems in a short period of time, Spain has only been improving for a long, long time, but it will be up and down. So, it's a matter of perspective. If you look to Ukraine, I think we're in great shape. If you look to Spain as your only reference point, 2007, then we are obviously in a much worse shape because there are so many people unemployed. And by the way, I think many of them unemployable in a long, long time because this thing cannot be improvised. So it's a drama for a lot of people. But Spain as a concept, I think it's good. I will not mention Catalonia because I think we will have maybe more time to do that. But I take also an approach to Catalonia that, it is a problem that will resolve also itself one way or another. So talking about it in the way we're doing it, when we have in this country, in the UK, a similar problem, that occupies a similar problem meaning that a part of the country is deciding if it's going to become independent or not, and the level of discussion is of such a difference, and the quality of discussion is of such a difference that I feel embarrassed to even talk about Catalonia anywhere else than in my own home, in the privacy of my kitchen, because it's not the problem itself; it's how we go about solving our problems, and this can be extended to public policy, almost in anything. The two parties that are basically majority elected, I don't know what they will be next year or in the following elections, but certainly now, are incapable of even agreeing on the most basic, mundane, stupid things. People don't vote for anything anymore. People vote against something. There is something really bad in that part of it, which Luis also, addresses in his book. And it's remarkable. And I really hope, and I'm convinced it will happen, that there will be a new set of politicians that will understand that the old ways, in both the Socialist and the Partido Popular, the old ways of making politics cannot really work anymore. And they will not do it for the generosity of the people. They will do it for their own self-survival. Otherwise, they're going to be thrown out of what they want to do for a living. So they'll change. But I don't know if that will be in a year or in 2 years, but it will happen. The same thing that in Italy, the old guys are going, and a new guy, 36 years old, coming from nowhere, never elected from a town, is now the Prime Minister of Italy.
Never elected.
Never elected, never. But that's his there. What does that say about all the other politicians that were there? So I'm more an optimist, but I'm an optimist in the long term. I'm not an optimist in the sense that we can solve all the problems that we've accumulated over centuries, probably, in a short go. But certainly I think that we are in the road to recovery.
Thank you, Emilio. And I think it's now time for Pablo Zalba to maybe respond to some of the points which were raised, especially about the political class and what the political class in Spain has done wrong, whether it is part of the problem or part of the solution. And also I'd like to hear a bit your thoughts on how you see the European response to the crisis developing. Personally, I fear that maybe moral hazard had come to Europe as much as it came, some would say, to Spain, Italy or Greece a while ago, and that some reforms which should happen or were sold as happening are not really happening. I'm thinking, for example, of banking union and the way that's developing. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on both topics.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today with such a team of speakers. Let me first clarify, Daniel, that he made a mistake. There are no 5 airports in a radius of 150 kilometers in below. There are 6 airports, in fact. So, first of all, to clarify, including one in France that is even closer to below, but I firmly believe in the single market, and I firmly believe that there are no borders. So there are even 6 airports, including Bilbao. But it's good to recognize this, because obviously if you want to solve the problems, you have first to recognize the mistakes. And let me also give you my opinion regarding the famous 6 words said by Draghi. I firmly believe that these words didn't save the euro at all. These words give us time, give the member states and the European institutions time to save the euro. And this is not recognized. This is not said by me, but it's recognized by President Draghi whenever you ask him about. I think precisely Europe is the different to what is going to be the solution to this crisis. Why? I obviously firmly believe that we have started the road to recovery, and I think how quick, how fast will be the recovery will not only depend on what the Spanish government and the Spanish politicians do, but also what the EU does at the respect. Because this time, I like the sentence that the party, we can go on to the party again, but this time will be different. Because this time there are new tools designed by the European institutions that will make even more difficult to go back to the party again. So, have Spain done everything? Of course not. I think nobody has recognized in Spain that we have done anything at all. The opposite, we firmly believe that many things still have to be done. We have to go on with the reforms. Public sector, I fully agree. In my opinion, the public sector faces a problem of efficiency rather than a problem of size. Education, I fully agree, Luis, the problem of education we face. And I agree with you that during the last reform issued by the Spanish government, the debate was not in the content, but the debate was about religion, about Catalan, and so on, and so on. And I think that, education will be a key factor for growth in the future, and unless we have a good education system, the growth will be much more difficult to cope. But I think we don't only need reforms at national levels, or no matter how many reforms do we do at national levels, if we don't go on reforming the EU institutions, will not work at all the reforms at national level. Because at the end, we have to be aware that we have to go on working in the economic integration, we have to go on working in the political integration, and in a context where citizens feel very far away from Europe, or even many things that Europe is responsible for the crisis we are suffering. But I think here, in this context, at the European level, we have an opportunity. And we have an opportunity because we need to create new institutions. We were discussing about, or someone said, banking union. We firmly believe we need a banking union. Now is taking place the... No, I'm surprised, but later on we'll discuss about that. Now is taking place the key trialogue about the banking resolution authority that hopefully will end in an agreement. But we need a more democratic Europe and a more democratic legitimacy. And I was saying that this is an opportunity to really create high-quality institutions, because we are creating many institutions at European level from zero. And this is the opportunity that we will never have again to really create a high-quality institutions. And we need to boost growth, and I insist this will not depend only on the reforms that member states do. Will depend a lot of the reforms we did at European level. We need to strengthen the single market. We need to strengthen the digital single market. It's completely unbelievable that in a sector that there are no barriers at all, we have created artificial barriers. So this is not difficult to create a digital single market. We have been talking and debating about that many, many years. And I think that one key element that will help and will support to boost growth definitely will be the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. I think we are not aware of the importance of this agreement, but we are well aware of all the critics, debates that regarding this agreement is taking place in Europe. And this debate about tariffs is this new debate about mutual recognition. No, it's about NSA, it's about Snowden, it's about all these things. And I think it's really dangerous to mix this with an agreement like with a tool that is key for boost growth in the near future. We have to be aware. And one of the problems also we face is obviously, and we have listened to that here, productivity. This not depends only in labor cost, depends on energy cost. We need to face the problem about energy cost, have a proper debate about what kind of energy we want, not only at national level, but at European level. Obviously, US is doing many advances at this respect, and Europe once again is with polemics whether shale gas or not, whether fracking, I'm not an expert on that, and so on, and so on, and so on. But we have to be aware that obviously our productivity will also depend on our energy cost. So I insist, I think we are on the way to recovery, but this time will not only depend on what we do at national level, in our case, in the case of Spain, but also what we do at European level. And let me finish with a small reflection about corruption. There is corruption in Spain, of course. There is corruption in other member states at the European Union level, of course. There is more corruption in Spain, I don't know. But I will tell you one example. One member of the royal family in Spain is being judged by corruption. This has never happened in any other country in Europe. In any other country in Europe, when there has happened a problem or a legal problem with a member of a royal family, and I think in this country there has been, nobody has been able to judge it. But there is another country, for example, in the Netherlands, that if I am okay, in the 1970s, there was a problem with the husband of the Queen, and nothing happened. Well, happened, but not from a legal point of view. So I firmly believe that in the case of Spain, when corruption arises, no matter whether you are a member of the royal family, a member of the government, a politician, a member of the Congress, you are judged. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much to all our speakers for yes, and wow, 7:45. I think we deserve you deserve a word of praise from me. And certainly now this leaves around maybe 20 minutes or thereabouts for questions. I will take them in groups of 3. I would like to ask you to identify yourself when you ask your question, and also if you have a particular speaker which your question is directed at. And I see my former colleague from the Financial Times at the back.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jimmy Burns. I suppose this is the joke in the pack, but since Reece, you threw it in and the others sort of tried to ignore it, I'm throwing it back in, and it's Catalonia. I mean, you use the analogy of the chickens. Everyone else talks about the two fast-speed trains going at each other and on a collision course. But the fact is that that's happening. And I was just interested if the speakers, all 4 of them, from their own different perspective and experience, you from an economic macro overview, you and Daniel from your market perspective, Emilio, you from an investor's point of view, and you from a European political point of view, could answer one question. If Catalonia becomes independent, what will be the impact of that on the future of Spain and Catalonia?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Emilio, to introduce topics that you should only talk in your kitchen table. I know it's not done in polite company. I think the key problem with the UK is that the problem for Spain is existential. Okay, that's what my friends. Some of my best friends are some of the best Catalan economists, and some of the best Spanish economists are Catalan. And they seem to always think in terms of these transfers and these balances and everything. That doesn't make any it's completely irrelevant. They think of it, if it costs more than 16 billion to Spain, and they're transferring 16 billion, then they will have to give up because that will be more costly. And it's like, that just doesn't make any sense. The problem for Spain is existential, and the problem is obviously that whereas England can exist without Scotland, and England can easily exist without Wales, and England can easily exist without Northern Ireland, it's still England, Spain cannot exist without Catalonia. The whole country would probably unravel, like if unraveled in the First Republic, and like it unraveled, or it was unraveling in the Second Republic. The Basque Country, Balearics, which is not at all independent now, would probably think that they would not want to be in a country where Catalonia was not there, etc., etc. So we would end up in Viva Cartagena. That's my sense. Okay, Viva Cartagena is the independence cry of a tiny town in the coast of Spain, which went independent in the First Republic. So that's why we're not divorcing. And I mean, the difference is, of course, Emilio says, well, you know, these guys are also divorcing. It's just, yeah, sure, divorces are, I mean, there are divorces and divorces. It's not the divorce the problem. The problem is whether it's consensual or not. A consensual divorce is not at all a problem for anybody. I mean, you just kind of partition the assets and the liabilities and move on. The problem is, if we agree that this is existential for Spain, then Spain is never going to agree to a partition of assets and liabilities. And if there is not a consensual divorce, then the problem is not, is Catalonia viable? Of course Catalonia is viable. Like Luxembourg, I mean, if Luxembourg is viable, how is not Catalonia going to be viable? The problem is the transition cost. And the transition cost in a situation of non-consensual divorce is a similar thing to what happens in the Eurozone. The Eurozone is in a mess because we have a lot of debt that we took on that we don't know who's going to end up paying, and we're kind of trying to quarrel about it for years and years on who pays. This would be similar. We would have two partners that are kind of need each other. They're the biggest trade partners. They have a joint existence for 500 years, throwing the kitchen sink at each other. Some of my friends, economists, talked about letting tomatoes rot in the border. In the Wall Street Journal article, I was just flabbergasted. I mean, what is Spain going to do if somebody kind of just stops the border because they are not letting to Europe or something? I mean, that's just, I mean, these kind of things are. So I think the premise is probably impossible. I actually myself don't think, given that I do think it's existential for Spain, I don't think it's possible that Catalonia will be independent. And that's probably the whole point, the whole problem. Given that, I think that if these things happen, it's going to get into a situation that will be very, very unpleasant for everybody, not just for Catalonia, but for everybody, Catalonia, Spain, Germany, everybody else. And do I think that this is a high probability event? No. I mean, the businessmen in Catalonia are clear on what should happen. The businessmen in the rest of Spain, many reasonable people are. But people are upset. There is a certain malaise in society. You give people a nice thing to fight for, they will want to fight for. And if you mess them up and you say you're not allowed to do things that they think are reasonable, although probably they aren't, they can get angry. So is it possible that things go out of control? I think given the amount of bad ill will among Spanish people and how people are angry and so on, I don't think it's impossible. And would that be costly? Very costly. Very costly, because both parties have a lot of ways to hurt each other. I mean, like in a bad divorce, the kids are going to suffer. Okay, so God kind of everybody do the right thing, and just sit down and negotiate. And there's a lot of things to agree. There's a lot of common ground. I mean, I think we should easily be able to find the common ground. And I just feel sad that we are not really doing what it takes.
There's two things that both parties know and don't say. First is that expansionary secession doesn't exist.
No.
There is not a single case in history of expansionary secession, and that is what is being sold to the Catalan people. There's another thing that both parties know and don't say, is that in Spain, nationalists are different than in other countries, because nationalist parties in Spain are secessionist and imperialistic. They not only want to separate, they want to add something that is not within their compound, like the Basque want to Navarra, the Catalans want the Balearic Islands, that kind of thing. Those two things, and that's fine. I'm not entering. I don't care about what people desire as a political goodwill or not. But those two things make matters a lot more complicated than the simple Scotland versus England, or Crimea, and Ukraine, which is very, very simple. Those two things are very important. The other thing that I think is also very important is the fact that the Catalan society is a society that is built from middle class and small and medium enterprises. And they do care about business, and they care about business a lot. And beyond the diatribe and the propaganda and everything, they like and they want to understand what is the risk to their and their families' lifestyle. So all of that leads me to believe that the same thing that we have seen in the last 30 years, we will see in the next 30 years, which is an ongoing headline-grabbing drama over and over and over again, that everything always is seeming to collapse, yet a lot more rationality than what seems to be implied by the headlines in what ends up happening. And that is my take. That's why there are two things that markets will not do, is invest in Catalonia ahead of an alleged expansionary secession, because everyone knows that it doesn't exist. Second is to go crazy in overweighting Spain or Catalonia, for that matter, in an environment of ongoing debate, and that's always going to hurt potential growth.
Right now, the market is not giving any weight to this. So, it's of course filling the newspapers, and if you put a question that is so hypothetical as, but forget about what the market says, but if it happens, it will be a disaster, I think, for both, for a long time. But if you keep pushing and you say, well, it doesn't matter, the Catalans were very sensible, and well-developed, they still want to do that, because I don't think anyone can avoid, someone that wants to really, really, really leave. It will leave. It will be bad, but it will happen. So, because, we're talking here about Spain, and then if you put it in the existential kind of line, because then the Basque will want to do it, and so on and so forth, then really we're talking about a country that doesn't really have anything other than a particular point in time where they come together, but it really is not keeping anything together. So the history that certainly everyone has shared, good or bad, is a different question, doesn't mean anything. We're talking about then an imaginary country. So if an imaginary country dissolves, so be it. If it is a country, it will find a way not to dissolve. But, the markets are simply not entering into the discussion. I think they're actually right, because to waste a lot of their energy in this is really futile. But everyone else seems to be interested in keeping this alive. You just have to ask who is interested in keeping this alive. And then you will find the answer to the problem.
Pablo, before you answer the question, I also wanted to ask you, do you see Scotland as a dangerous precedent for the Catalan question, or is something which just doesn't concern?
No, I don't think it's a bad precedent at all. I mean, the context is completely different, but completely different. And, well, I think the only one common point is that in the case that any of them become independent, that in the case of Catalonia, I fully agree that is, if not impossible, almost impossible, they both leave the EU. And this has been clearly stated by the President of the Commission, by many commissioners, by words, by written. So, I mean, this is the only, in my opinion, common point between the two situations, that if any of them become independent, the day afterwards, they are out of the EU with all the consequences that this has. I think that I agree with Luis that we have to negotiate, we have to dialogate, of course, but with one red line: the law, the Spanish constitutions. This is the only one red line, and I think the Prime Minister Rajoy has really clearly stated this. And finally, I mean, it's true that the context in Catalonia that Daniel describes is many SMEs that are somehow very traditional SMEs that really are innovative and dynamic. And there is a very good article today in FT that really explains this somehow context about the SMEs and how they are reacting to this problem and how it's going to be the reaction, or is the expected reaction in the coming weeks and months.
Excellent. I'll take a question from the front and then from the gentleman there.
Well, I'm not going to that billion-dollar question. Oh, thank you. I'm not.
You can identify yourself.
Okay, Sebastian Balfour from the government department here. I'm not going to go into the billion-dollar question of Catalonia. I'm going to return to some of the things that you've all mentioned. I was very surprised that Luis began by saying there was no corruption in Spain. I think he was being ironical. I can only assume that. Anyway, Pedro...
in everyday life.
Pablo, sorry.
Actually, in everyday life interactions,
yes.
There is no corruption, and yet the political system is very corrupt. So I was trying to draw a very sharp contrast between, it's not a corrupt country, it's a country that's shown...
Well, it depends what your definition of corruption is in the first place. I mean, tax evasion, VAT evasion is rife throughout Spain. I think we all agree that. Also, land reclassifications by local authorities, land that was meant to be green land, which has been reclassified. I mean, that's a problem perhaps in the past because there's not such development taking place now. And there are other forms of, perhaps we might call it semi-corruption, like nepotism, like amiguismo, like neocaciquismo, perhaps you could even say. Now, that points to an institutional problem, I think. Not just a problem of institutions, but a problem of the lack of legitimacy of the state. And if you take the 15M, the 15th of May movement, that has created a huge wave of revulsion against the institutions as they are now. My question is, to what extent is this problem of loss of legitimacy going to affect economic recovery? What is the interaction between the two?
Thank you. I'll take a couple of other questions and then we'll... there's a question there. Microphone is coming.
Hi, thank you. My name is Antonio Timonet from IHS. And we have mentioned that Spain is on the road to recovery. Maybe it's a strong recovery, a weak recovery, anemic recovery, maybe not the same recovery. But we also have mentioned that Spain needs to rebuild some institutional setting, build social capital, and reform education. But going back again to the question of Catalonia, and we assume, I think we all assume that the partition is not going to happen. This is kind of the scenario that these panelists assume. But the question is, what do you do with the 7 million angry Catalans? What do you do with them to build social capital, to reform education, and to reform the institutional setting in Spain?
Excellent. Are there other questions? There's a question there. Gentleman, just at the top there.
Hello, I'm Harry Prabhu, first year undergraduate here at the LSE. I was wondering what you think of, would increasing trade with Latin America be an effective buffer to future financial crises for Spain?
Thank you. And the final question there, and then we'll...
Hi, my name is José Antonio Camacho. I'm an LSE Master's student of Finance and Economics here at the LSE. And I wanted to ask you if you would recommend me to go back to Spain after this Master's or staying here. Thank you.
I think this is an excellent question. One word answer from each one of you. So let's start. So I'm going to ask who wants to answer the first question, which is really about legitimacy of institutions and.
We can go before.
Okay, so do you want all? Okay, you can all. So I repeat the four questions. One is about can there be economic recovery when there are doubts over the legitimacy of institutions? Then the second question is what do you do with the angry Catalans? And then the third question is about Latin America and the fourth question, you've all heard it. So should Jose Antonio go back to Spain?
I'm going to start with your question. And let me tell you something that very few people like to say, is that corruption is not that important as long as it's well publicized. And this is very, very important. The fact is, I was at with this director ex-director of El Mundo in a dinner, and we went through all of the headlines since 1999 when the paper was published. And what did we see? We saw two things. First, cases of corruption. Second, the same people over and over. This is an important factor, and comes back to what Luis was saying. There is a problem of corruption that is directly linked to construction and to the construction boom. As when that unwinds, it's quite amazing how little level of corruption there are at the institutional level below what involves construction and land. So that's an important factor. In any case,
sorry, can I interrupt, because he's put a context into that.
Yeah.
He's added other cultural traits of not paying taxes, of actually putting your nephew in the job of someone else that is better simply because it's your nephew. That, I think the context is wider than, construction payments to majors all across Spain. Is that a problem to Spain, or you don't think it's a problem?
That is a problem. It is not a problem that has ever impacted strong economic growth. And I'm sorry, when I left university in 1990, they told me you're never going to reach anything because you don't know people in high places, your family is not important and this and that, and you don't know this and you don't know that, and here we are. So, things like that happen in many, many countries. And in Spain, what we tend to do is over-publicize them as well. I remember this MP in Italy that was found that somebody had been paying for his Rome apartment. And the guy said on television, if I find the guy that has been paying for my apartment, I will sue him. It's a different way of approaching corruption. The point that I'm trying to make is that all those things happen. It's important to recognize them, and it's important to do something about it. What he was saying is not a stupid thing. The fact that you have very heavily publicized cases of very high-profile people, and that ultimately changes with culture. But it affects potential growth, unfortunately. It does. Spain could grow 3-4% instead of 1.5-2% with an environment that is more investor-friendly and more open and more transparent. Yes, but it doesn't kill it. And what do we do with the Catalans? Give them jobs. Yeah. Give them jobs. I don't believe in welfare, but I believe in jobs. Take away the welfare in Andalusia and in Extremadura and in Galicia, in Basque Country and in Catalonia, and bring back jobs, and nationalism will continue to exist in a completely different way.
Okay. Emilio, do you want to answer those questions?
I think that on the easiest question, which is you go back to Spain or not, I think that definitely that's something that if you are studying here, and hopefully you're a good student because you're putting a long day, you will have the choice. And I would say that one of the things that will help us all is that people don't have such a drama between where they work. That the world is becoming a lot smaller, and being from a place and working in another and marrying someone from a different place that has never been in Spain. It's okay. It's not a drama that you can develop your career and your place in a different way. So I would not be obsessed with that. As if you can or you cannot, you will find out. But I'm pretty sure that being here is a pretty well place to start with that discussion. On the trade with Latin America, I would say this is absolutely essential. Someone asked about Latin America. It's very obvious. The Spanish, like their own kind of core stands to Latin America. It is not an easy market, and of course not everyone can compete, but we certainly have competitive advantage. All our companies and everyone who's in the large companies will tell you the advantages that we have from that market are enormous. And I think we've done a good job. We probably can do a better job. So I think that's a good example. And in Catalonia, I honestly don't think that this will be anything else than a discussion that will end up in a different place than we are on. I think that constitutional reform is unavoidable. The discussion, of course, it has to be done within the law. I think it's obvious. Spain is not going to do anything against the law, but laws can be changed, including the law of laws. And I think it will be changed. How long and how fast, and if it's for one reason or another, but people, give themselves these laws to live together. And if they cannot live together under this law will be changed. It's a little bit of a circular argument to say we cannot discuss because the Constitution doesn't allow it. We'll change the Constitution. It's the next thing we'll do. So that's how people do it, right? So I don't have a big problem that this problem will not get to the two trains. I don't think anyone in that train, in those two trains, really has an interest in colluding a law, it looks like.
Very true. Very true.
Well, regarding Catalonia, I fully agree, I think, with Daniel that the worst enemy of the independent movement will be the economic recovery. I firmly believe so. Regarding the question of going back to Spain or no, certainly I didn't expect this question in this school. Imagine we are in Colombia with American students. Do you think someone will ask, will I be able to go back to Minnesota? Of course not. I think it's the time to believe in Europe. It's the time to believe that there are no borders in Europe. And no matter whether I am from Spain, from Germany, or from whatever, I have the opportunity to work, to study in any country around. Can you imagine in the news of the Minnesota Daily concerning about the students that go to New York and unfortunately cannot come back to Minnesota? So I think we have to start and believe in Europe. The day that we don't ask this question will be the day that Europe really exists. Regarding Latin America, I fully agree with you. I was having lunch yesterday with a partner of a Spanish law firm that has many offices in Latin America and that has an office in China. That office in China is really successful because of the interest of the Chinese companies in Latin America and because they want to be assisted from a legal point of view in Latin America. They are trusting in this company. So Latin America is really an opportunity for the Spanish companies, but not only in Latin America, also as a bridge to Asia. Regarding corruption again, well, I think it's true that in Spain we face a problem of fiscal evasion. Someone calculates this in 30% of the economy. Imagine, let's call it citizen corruption. Imagine we ask an Spaniards, tomorrow you are able to eliminate the corruption, political corruption, or the citizen corruption. What will be the answer? Of course, political corruption. What is the impact of the economy, of the political corruption in the economy? Obviously, nothing compared at all with what I call citizen corruption, what is fiscal evasion, and so on and so on. But it seems that citizens do not care at all. I think as time goes by, start to care much more about this than in the past. I firmly believe so. I think we face a cultural problem, but I firmly believe also that this, again, will be mitigated once the economic and political and at the end social integration in Europe is achieved. Regarding democratic legitimacy, I firmly believe we don't face that problem in Spain. In Spain, we don't have a party like Beppe Grillo in Italy, for example. It's true that the two main parties are facing a problem of lack of support, but taking into account that the difficult measures that the current government has taken, despite of this, still is the first one in the polls, and nobody doubts, even Financial Times, that we'll win the next coming elections. I think this precisely proves that we don't face a problem of democratic legitimacy. There are new parties, of course, but no new party is against Europe, for example. No new party is against the current constitution. Someone argued that it must be changed, but Emilio also argues that, and I think it's not suspicious of it or being anti-sistema guy or something like that. So I don't think we face a problem of democratic legitimacy. And I think I have... one more question, I think it was Luis or Daniel that say that most of the corruption cases was linked to construction. I will add also and saving banks.
Which is the same.
Quite linked.
Which is the same.
I mean, I think this has a positive consequence. No longer construction will be an engine of the economy, and no longer saving banks exist. So I don't know whether this will help to somehow mitigate corruption, but let's be optimistic about that.
So quickly, I come in between all my colleagues on the culture and the corruption and all that. I do think, like Emilio and like Daniel and Pablo, that corruption is a huge problem for growth, and I do think that it needs to be solved. I do think that think of any sector in the economy, and you see the consequences of bad policy, corrupt decisions in everyone. We could go through one. Financial sector, as Pablo said, was one, and that is costing us hundreds of billions to solve. But I would say it's not cultural. So I'm against Emilio's view here, although I share his analysis in many of the other dimensions. I would argue. I actually spent a chapter in the book saying driving and cigarette smoking are actually really great examples for Spain. Driving in Spain was for madmen, okay? It was the most dangerous country that I knew for driving. You just have to be crazy to drive there. From one day to the next, they introduced the driver's license, how do you call it, with points? Like, how do you call it in English? The carnet de puntos, point system. And, from one day to the next, just drive now in Spain. Everybody's doing 120 per hour. You give Spaniards the right incentives, they behave like everybody else, okay? I don't believe in culture at all, okay? And in the case of Spain, less, okay? The Spaniards who are here are working. I come in the first person in the whole building in the office, and you go at 12 o'clock in the night there, and you see me there working, okay? We work harder than anybody else, and I bet you Emilio will say the same, and Daniel, etc. So people work hard, and you give us the incentives, people do what they need to do, okay? Of course, if the incentives are wrong, and if the judicial system is a mess, and if trials take forever, and everything prescribes, then people just don't do what they need to do. And I don't think that's a unsolvable problem. That's not a cultural problem. Same thing with taxes. You give people the right incentive to pay taxes, they'll pay, okay? If everybody's like having accounts in Switzerland and they don't pay and then nothing happens, and then of course people don't pay taxes. Everywhere, in my opinion. If you live in the US for 2 days, you grow so scared of the IRS, you will not believe it. The IRS will do anything to find who's not paying, will turn their friends, will investigate, will use any tactic. They will just, now they have this new law. If you're declaring tax in the US and you don't tell them every account you have and every single dollar you have in assets in any country in the world, you spend 9 years in jail. Seriously, that is how you finish these problems. So that's on the corruption. I won't talk about the trade. I agree with what it was said, and I agree on the other issues that were raised. On coming back, I think Emilio gave you an excellent answer. And I am sure that the 4 people in this panel actually share exactly Emilio's experience, which is, I will go next week, like Daniel went yesterday, to give 3 talks in Spain. I will be flying through Spain. The world is much more than it used to be. You can be tomorrow somewhere else, and you'll be, you can have your friends, you can go for dinner, and then you can come back and do your job. I agree with Pablo, it's Europe. I don't think you should make a drama of it. Get a good job. The euro exists, the single market exists, and if you get good experience in the company and it doesn't work there, they just move on, and I think that is what saves Spain. We are part of the Eurozone, and we are part of the euro, and that gives you an environment where you can make all those decisions on your own. So that's my final.
Well, I think we should draw this very interesting panel to an end. We've learned about jokes on Crimea. We've solved Jose Antonio's live questions. But most importantly, we've learned a great deal about Spain, its economy, its institutions. So I think you should join me. We want to join me to thank our speakers and the Spanish Society for having us today.